Sounds good.
Awesome.
Darn it. Here we go.
You're like, oh my gosh, this thing is awesome. Yeah, gotta take care of your crap, guys.
Mm.
Sorry, assigned topic was what? Give an example that shows or that demonstrates how the corporate veil protects shareholders, or of how the corporate veil can be pierced, right?
Yeah. I found an article on the National Law and Review and talks about how this guy is suing like a telecommunications company, or no, he's not suing the company, he's suing the owner. He did some research and found out that the owner is directly one of the owners is directly responsible for some of the ways that they telemarket through phone calls, and they found that the company and then the way that they are marketing through telecommunications is in violation of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. And so the judge that is overseeing it is going to let it go to court. And even though it's an LLC and the owners and the partners, like everybody who owns the company, is technically has limited liabilities, because that person is directly responsible or directly participating in those, I guess the what do you call it? The infringement on that act, or illegal activity, whatever you want to call it. The person can sue that person specifically for liability for that. So even though it's an LLC and he's supposed to have that protection, that is piercing the corporate veil, because he is directly, what was the wording that it said? Corporate officers can be held directly liable for TCPA violations that they personally participate in. So that's an example that I found.
See, my example I just talked about was a reference to how the corporate veil can be pierced. It's basically what it wants to talk, or what this is discussing, is in a corporation, the shareholders are basically protected behind this, curtain because of the corporation, right?
Yeah.
Corporation takes the blame for, or fall for, a lot of legal things. So there is sometimes, though, when it can be pierced and say, like, they can be reached or blamed. And so my example was some of the shareholders have been using the company's funds as their personal funds, and the company goes through some, or the corporation goes through some struggles and needs to repay its debts, but they failed to do so. So now the court can find the shareholders liable for that debt because of them using the corporate funds as their personal.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I could find in the book was the Pierce corporate veil, but I couldn't find anything about like how it protected. So I just kind of gave an example off of the Pierce veil. And I don't even think I fully understand it still. So a fraudulent purpose. So there's two conditions that goes into it. The book says a fraudulent purpose, and then operations of the corporate business as though the corporation does not exist. So the second part of that, operation of the corporate business as though the corporation doesn't exist. What is that even like? Is that just saying like, yeah, I have a corporation, but in all reality, it doesn't exist, and they can get away with the Pierce corporate veil because of that? Is that what it's referring to? I mean, I'm not sure. What do you guys think?
From what I understand is that it's referring to when they can go through that protection that the corporation provides for the individual, and they can sue that individual as if the corporation didn't exist. So if they're participating in fraudulent activities or whatever it is that is illegal that they're participating in, they can go through the corporation protection that protects them from being liable for certain things, because if they're personally participating in it, piercing that corporate veil means that they would go through that protection and sue that individual as if that, like, just as if you were suing just the individual and that corporation didn't exist. Does that kind of make sense? Or did I just reword it and it didn't make any sense like the book does?
No. I think.
Or does anybody else have something else that makes more sense?
Yeah, I think rewording it helps. So, in my own words, if I was to, correct me if I'm wrong, if I was to explain it, so someone that's in a corporation and ends up like they do, let's say, like a fraudulent purpose, like they personally do something, and it's like at work, then that would kind of go along with the example of they can use the Pierce, the corporate veil for that, or would it make it so that the Pierce, the corporate veil would take them out of, like, would separate them from that corporate kind of view and just focus on them as like more personal matter?
So with the corporate veil, basically who are they finding liable for damages or debts or whatever it is? That's one benefit if you're a shareholder in part of a corporation is the shareholders are like their own entity, and then you have the corporations as own. The shareholders are protected by that like a shield. So if there's something going on, generally the corporation that will take the blame, will have to pay off the debts, whatever is liable for anything. Some situations, because of fraudulent behavior, or basically that's a big thing, legal practice, fraudulent behavior, stuff like that. Corporate veil does not protect the shareholders. Now the shareholders can be found liable. Does that make sense?
Also, I found a very interesting information. For example, I found factors that most common factors that courts consider in determining whether to pierce the corporate veil. For example, one factor is that the corporation engage in fraudulent behavior. The corporation failed to follow corporate formalities. The corporation never had enough funds to operate, or it was not really a separate entity that could stand on its own. And and I think that I found that information very helpful, and it helped me understand that what was the meaning about piercing the corporate veil. And I found an example for where it is. Okay, here. Okay, I want to read it. It's not too long. It says the defendant was the sole owner and director of an Iowa corporation that had existed for nearly 20 years. They hired a construction company to build a wastewater treatment facility. After beginning work on the project, the corporation abandoned the work. The plaintiff obtained a $4,000 judgment against the corporation for breach of contract. However, he was unable to collect the money, and the plaintiff then filed a new action seeking to pierce the veil of the corporation and recover the money, because he was this person. It was the defendant was its owner. So let me check. So at the end, the evidence showed that the defendant didn't keep a separate account from the corporation, and also he was using what is he? Okay, well, the thing is that they where I have the information. Well, at the end, it shows that this owner he needed to pay to the company because he wasn't keeping like the records properly, and since he didn't fulfill the contract, then he was required to pay the money because it was kind of fraudulent. So that's the example that I found.
Do any of you guys watch the show Bull?
No.
It's a show on CBS right now. I don't know if it's on Netflix or anything right now yet, but it's about a show about a guy who runs a trial science company, and they have a bunch of different episodes that talk about each different individual like trial. And one episode, it talks about, actually it doesn't mention piercing the corporate veil, but that's exactly what he does in the episode. Is that this terrorist group blows up this bridge and like 30,000 people die, and the terrorist group uses this bank to store all their money, and that funded the bridge blow up, or the destruction of the bridge. And so they went after the bank, but the bank was only so liable because it is a bank, and they can't keep track of what people do with their money. And so they ended up going after the CEO of the bank because he was directly corresponding with the head terrorist of the group. And because he was corresponding directly with that terrorist, they held the CEO responsible for all of the terrorist acts and funding that terrorist group and for the bridge blow up. And so he was like charged with all this other stuff as well as like sued for personal damages for a certain person. But I mean, that's like, I just was sitting there thinking about that as I was like, oh, I just watched an episode about that on Bull. Mm-hmm. So it's a good show. But anyway, that's not necessarily a news article, but another example.
Yeah, that was a really great example. So according to my understanding, basically, when we are studying is basically any kind of fraudulent activity, right? So let me check. So for example, a corporation and shareholders, they are kind of separate. That's where I understood. For example, I had read an article about a case. Well, actually, my case was about a University of Chicago that was owned by several shareholders. One of the owners was in charge to keep all the financial records of the university. And then this person started to include his personal expenses with the records of the school. And then when he was caught, he was responsible and liable for all of his fraudulent activities. So it's basically when people are kind of including personal debts, or they are kind of including other expenses into the corporation. So the corporation says or states, well, this is, well, the rest of the shareholders will not be liable for all of these personal expenses. And then basically they are pointing out only this person, right?
Can you repeat that one more time? I got confused, like right at the end when you were explaining that.
Yeah. So for example, we need to kind of separate between the corporation and the people that is involved. For example, the shareholders. If there is, I don't know, a person that is keeping track of all of the financial statements, and then this person includes personal expenses into this corporation, then basically what we are studying right now is that we need to kind of separate between the corporation and any kind of fraudulent activities, right?
I believe so. I think that's correct. The way that you had explained it, like separating between the two.
Yeah.
So what example do we want to use for our for the assignment?
I think either yours, Michael, or Eduardo's. I think those were the two that were like that made the most sense. So
If you
I mean,
want, I don't know
yeah.
who's writing for this class, or who is going to submit the assignment. Because if you want, I can do it.
If you want to do it, you can do it. I had started it, but if you want
Oh,
to do,
really?
if you wanted to do it, that's fine too. I'm okay with. I mean, whatever. I mean, so
Yeah,
as soon as it gets done, right?
yeah, sure. If you want, I can do it. No worries.
Okay.
What I'll do is after we're all done, I'll send you the recording of our meeting just through our team email or group.
Okay.
I like your example, Eduardo.
Okay, so we can use my example, and let me just put it right here. Okay, so I got the example here, and we need to write some question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know where can I find where can I find the format or?
Oh, if you go under the due date 2,
Mhm.
and then click on week 9 group activities, concepts, and like the instructions assignment or whatever. It'll bring up the
Okay.
instructions and it'll say like to complete the assignment it's step 1, the group assignment step 2, Zoom, and then it's under step 5. It has a link that will download. If you click on it, it's called template for group assignment.
Okay. Okay, I got it right here. Hmm. Okay, so I got the example. I have also the explanation. Okay, and then it says quiz question.
So I remember something in the book that says, well, we can probably choose that as the first question or as the right question, where it says the information about the corporate veil. It says the corporate veil may be purged if two conditions are present. The first one is a fraudulent purpose, and the second one, operation of the corporate business as though the corporation does not exist. So I think we can probably use that information um, as the right question that we have in the example.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Mm.
You've answered all of the questions.
So what do we need? Just questions for the example now?
Yes, I think that we have already chosen the right question, so I guess we have to choose the other three wrong questions.
All right.
Okay, so we only need the wrong questions. What do you think would be a good question about this? Like, what kind of information do we need to provide in these questions, or what's the structure we need to follow?
You want on the, because we have you come up with, a quiz question.
Mhm.
One correct answer and then three incorrect answers. We just need a little snippet of like an explanation of the reasoning behind it.
Mhm. Okay, let me check.
So, what exactly is the question that we're using? Have we come up with a question? I guess I'm kind of lost on like. Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding a whole lot. I guess I'm not like completely. I don't know.
Mm,
Read your example one more time, if you
yeah,
could. Write it.
yeah, I'm going to put it right here so you can also see it. Just let me
Sounds good.
paste it.
You've answered all of the questions.
Stop.
Okay. Here's the example, so you can see it.
Okay.
So I guess we can also put something like, according to the information provided before, the construction company will be liable to pay for, I don't know, to pay for, let me check.
We could the question could be will the judge rule in favor of the plaintiff and award the plaintiff that $400,000 from the defendant its owner, or will the judge rule in favor of the defendant? We could say the correct answer would be the plaintiff, because says some of the factors courts consider when deciding whether to pierce the corporate veil is specifically because they're commingling the funds. That could be the correct answer, and then one of the incorrect answers could be that that the judge will rule in favor of the defendant. I guess it's like a yes or no question or yes or no answer. I guess we could do like 2 questions or 2 answers that say for the plaintiff and 2 answers that say for the defendant, and then have so the correct answer could say the judge will rule in favor of the plaintiff, the construction company, because the owner was commingling funds. That could be the correct answer. And then the first wrong answer could be the defendant because in a corporation, we could say like just in the incorrect answer itself, it says the defendant because the corporation and a person is one in itself, kind of playing off of assuming that a corporation is a sole proprietor, I guess, a little bit, like saying that it is, but not really, because obviously it's a wrong answer. And then we could explain, no, a corporation, explain a corporation is separate, but because he was commingling personal finances with the company's finance, it became blurry and it was okay for them to pierce the corporate veil and go after the money.
Yeah,
and
I like
then
it.
a wrong answer.
Uh-huh.
And then another wrong answer could be the defendant and say that
Are we able to do just like a false question? 'Cause that's frequently on like the tests and stuff.
what question?
Just a true or false question.
I don't know. Can we do a true or false question? Because in the template it asks for 3 different false answers. So I was like, I guess we just always assume that we have to have 3 false or 3 wrong answers.
But true,
I think as in,
false or something.
I think in the test is frequently questions for just true or false. So, a lot of the stuff's made up by students from my assumption. So we can come up with 4 answers. I don't know if we could do true or false. And I'm down for it.
We can do whatever.
Okay, I think that so far I got the correct question and the other wrong questions. So I think I just need to edit those questions, and I just gonna need the link from Michael, and I think that I can submit it. I think that we have enough information to do all the questions, so I think we'll be good.
Sounds good to me. We got everything then.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, well, I'll stop the recording and then I'll get that email to you. Just through the BYUI email. Once it finishes, okay.